Hello, my name is Matthew Humer, and I will be presenting The Entrepreneurs at Twitter, Building a Brand, a Social Tool, or a Tech Powerhouse. It's a case study by the Richard Ivey School of Business. What is Twitter? In its simplest sense, it's sending a burst of inconsequential information. That's the definition. Or it also has the second definition of chirps from birds. This is a pretty accurate representation of what Twitter is. It's sending a 140 character message out to the world to be picked up by whomever shares similar interest, finds a keyword, is following you, or potentially none of the above. It's a form of communication on its simplest level. It has close to 200 million users as of March 2011, which is a dramatic increase from the fourth quarter of 2009, in which it was projected to have only 24 million users, so that's a pretty substantial growth. And their goal is to have 1 billion active users and $1.54 billion in revenue by 2013, presumably the fourth quarter of 2013. It's also a hot commodity. It's been valued up to $10 billion based on rumors of a Facebook and Google buyout. Unfortunately, it's been pretty unprofitable. In 2009, it most likely was profitable based on a one-time contract signing between Twitter and both Microsoft and then separately Google, which allowed the search engines to index tweets so that if I typed in onto Google, say, Amana dishwasher, and someone had tweeted about an Amana dishwasher, their tweet would show up as one of the search results. So that's why 2009 was likely profitable, not because of anything else within the company itself. 2010 was unprofitable. 2011 appears to be going poorly as well. So let's look at their goals. Like I said, $1.54 billion in revenue and 1 billion active users by 2013. In July of 2009, TechCrunch revealed several internal Twitter documents that showed just how much of an uphill climb meeting those goals would be. So I'm going to get into some of that information. Okay, so this was released in July of 2009. So quarters 1 and 2 are based on real information from Twitter. Sorry, quarters 1 and 2 for 2009 are based on real information. Quarters 3 and 4 of 2009, as well as all of 2010, are projections based on internal Twitter estimates. So you can assume that they're probably reasonably accurate, although likely very optimistic. So I want to point out a few things. Before we get too far, if it's in the salmon or the blue, this is information that I have added to help understand the ratios that are going on here. I also added the 2013 targets, which are a little confusing, but I'll get into more depth when we cover them, because I just want to give you an idea of how their current relationships as of publishing this would have to change in order to meet their 2013 targets. So, in 2009, quarter 2, internal Twitter documents show users in millions as 12 million users. External sources peg the number in the second quarter of 2009 as around 29 million users. It's possible that the definition of user is different between the two sources. Twitter defines an active user as a unique individual who interacts with the service at least once a week. It's possible that external sources have a different count, potentially, just the number of accounts in the service. I'm not aware of what it is, but there is a discrepancy there, which is important to think about, because if analysts are overestimating Twitter's influence, their user count, that directly goes to its valuation, which up to this point has only been, a hypothetical game. They've yet to act upon any of these valuations, so it's still very unclear what the real value of the company is, which is why we're talking today. Alright, so for 2009, they projected a goal of 25 million for quarter four of 2009, but they projected a goal of 25 million users, which came very close to what the number that has actually occurred based on outside estimates of 24 million users. So that's pretty good. Now notice how rapidly they think things are going to increase. From the fourth quarter 2009 to the fourth quarter 2010, they expect to see a four-fold increase from 25 million to 100 million. From the fourth quarter of 2009 to, presumably, the fourth quarter of 2013, they're expecting to see, or they're hoping to see, a 40-fold increase over the course of 4 years from 25 million users to 1 billion users. When it comes to revenue, they have the same optimism. As I said, in 2009, they had the one-time search engine deal, so they were most likely profitable that year, though only because of the search engine deal. Nothing else within the company was making any money of substance. In 2010, they made roughly 45 million in revenue, but they did not turn a profit. In 2011, their projected revenue was between 100 and 110 million, but based on the last quarter of 2010, the projected costs at that point, it's unlikely, even if those costs remain the same, that Twitter would have anything more than a very minor profit. So my suspicion is that Twitter is actually not going to make any money in 2011 as well, unless an outside contract, such as the two that occurred in 2009, was to occur again. Now, go from their 110, let's be optimistic, $110 million projected revenue for 2011, and in 2 years they want to increase that 14 times, 14-fold, to a total of 1.54 billion, with a net profit of the 1.1 billion. So I want to point out some oddities here with the numbers that I found that I think kind of tell about where Twitter was at the second quarter of 2009 and how within 4 years going from that to where they are hoping to be with the billion users and the 1.54 billion in revenue is just kind of ridiculous. The first is that I figured out the cost per employee per quarter. And so what you'll see, and that's roughly $35,000. So they had 30 employees in quarter one 2009, and it cost 1.05 million in personnel costs. In quarter three, they were expecting to have 60 employees, and the cost would become 2.1 million. So these are internal Twitter documents. I think that's a pretty safe bet. They're very consistent throughout. It's $35,000. That's their cost per employee per quarter. I have no idea why it seems so high, but I'm sure they have some very good reasons. But those are the numbers they have. I should note that those are not number of employees. Those are actually 30 employees. That's not like 30 and there's an implication that's actually 30,000. That is the number of employees, and I can assure you of that because their 2013 target is to have 5,200 total employees. So that really is 30 employees with a people cost of 1.05 million. If that cost per employee per quarter was to continue, that could very, very quickly grow out of control. Now, when we talk about their target numbers, that's for 2013 spread out over 4 quarters and then combined at the end. So that's a yearly total. Because of the way the information is, what I did is just to demonstrate how the numbers, how much more efficient Twitter would have to become from its earlier self in order to make the numbers work, I compressed them all and I said, okay, let's assume 2013 quarter 4, the first 3 quarters there's no money, no costs, no revenue, no nothing. Let's press everything into the fourth quarter so that you only have one quarter to worry about just to see. Because you have to understand that those personnel costs, that's only per quarter. You might not have 5,200 employees the third quarter in real life. You might have, say, 5,000. You're still going to have a substantial cost. So even if they only pay for 5,200 employees for one quarter, it's going to cost them $182 million. Then I looked at the organization cost, and I found that the organization cost averages right around 2 times the people cost. If this trend was to continue, organization costs would be about $364 million. That's the number I came up with, just, somewhere in that range. If that was to be true, between the people costs and the organization costs, if their revenue was at $1.54 billion, their projected 2013 earnings for that quarter would fall over $100 million short of their $1.1 billion goal. What that means is that they have to improve their efficiency along the way. Most likely that's going to happen by cutting down that ridiculous cost per employee per quarter. But they have to do some serious cuts along the way to make these numbers even feasible based on their earlier averages that they projected. So now let's move on to the questions that we were prompted with. So, what does the company's service represent to its user? Twitter, on its most basic level, a big reason it attracts people is because it's a fad. Especially during this time period, had a lot of free press going on about how valuable it was, how new, how revolutionary, and they even bought into it. They within one of the internal documents, refer to themselves as being a new form of communication. While that may or may not be true depending on how you look at it in the history of text messaging, there's a lot of ego there and there's a lot of newness, and people are naturally attracted to new things within the tech and software worlds. It also, out of those people though, it loses on average at least 40% of its users. They come, they try out the service, they don't like it, and they leave. The people who are more likely to stay are most likely also the ones who have a cause or an issue that attracts them to the service. So say I'm like following a celebrity, Demi Moore on Twitter. She tweets about eating a pizza. I feel like I, have talked to Demi Moore, made that social connection. It creates a new level of almost like a friendship, a digital intimacy with people who I otherwise would not meet, thought leaders, politicians, celebrities, whoever. There's also the commercial interest. If you're a business, you want to be where the people are. And so even though Twitter has yet to figure out how it's going to monetize itself, businesses are still very interested in getting involved because they really want to influence that customer dynamic. If there's a problem, they want to fix it. If there's a potential sale, they want to make it. So they're going to be where the people are. What we've seen more recently, towards the end of the time period that the case covers, is that there are political issues, political causes, both within the U.S. with the Obama 2008 campaign. Twitter was huge. Twitter helped turn out the under 30 age group in much higher numbers than before. Also, if you look abroad, you have the Arab Spring, where groups that are protesting against government oppression in developing countries are using Twitter in order to network. And Twitter helps feed the movement, political activism. It's just natural, unfiltered information, so it naturally lends itself to free exchange of thoughts and ideas. And for the Arab Spring, that was kind of revolutionary. It's difficult to speak your mind in person sometimes when you risk persecution, but online, being able to find like-minded people becomes much easier, and it opens that pathway, and it helped ferment some of the political energies that are even now reshaping a significant part of the Middle East and North Africa. it's also, in its most basic form, a great way just to yell to the world. I mean, I have a problem with my laptop company, Dell. I wrote them letters, nothing happens. I go on Twitter and I start talking about how Dell is, an awful company and their laptops aren't of high quality. And I do that and I start talking to other people and I kind of build momentum. Dell is then going to want to interact with me in a new way because they're not going to want me to be insulting their product and harming their sales, because thousands of people can potentially read my angry tweets about their company. It changes the dynamic of how people interact in a very interesting way. Also, it's open source, so other people can program to incorporate their offerings into Twitter and vice versa. So it's really useful in that way, and it's kind of a developer's dream almost. Unlike Facebook and Google and all of them, which are not open source. Although Google does have an open source project, but the search code I do not believe is open source. So what's their likely business strategy? What they're doing right now is they're trying to build an online community. They're putting this way ahead of monetizing because they continue to receive substantial investments from venture capitalists. In 2010, February 2010, they were valued at $3.7 billion without having turned a penny up to that point, made a penny up to that point. And the reason for this is because people continue to see the community grow, and in the past they've seen major players like Google buy out companies that up to that point had not been profitable, such as one of the founders' earlier companies. I'll get into that later, but you don't have to prove profitability in order to be bought out, and I think that's a lot of the valuation, is that people are thinking Twitter is going to be bought out, which I don't think so, but I'll also get into that in a few seconds. And they're also developing a platform. I think that Twitter is likely to try to expand beyond the basic communication and work to create more, almost a lifestyle, than it is simply a method of communication. Now, how Twitter plans to survive in the long run. I don't think they have a plan. So I'm going to talk to you about the two key reasons why I don't believe that. The first one is their founder, Ryan Williams. I'm sure he's a great guy. I have nothing against him. But based on the description within the case, I suspect that he is not psychologically built for the long haul, for staying with a project I think he's probably a very creative person, but he has a history of fleeting interests. Up to this point, he had never managed to get a company past 15 to 20 employees. He's never brought a startup to the point of turning a profit. The company he owned before this, which created Blogger, was bought out by Google before it had made a penny. He has no idea how to actually get an idea past the 20 employee potential phase and into the 200 employee profitability phase. He also has acknowledged that he is already now thinking about how to revolutionize email. His strength is in the creativity. It's not in the follow-through. And if he's already getting bored with his idea, he's ready to move on. I mean, he's made his name, he's done what he needs to do. He's probably not the best person to be helping steer Twitter. So I think that that's a big issue that they have. The other issue I have is Twitter's valuation. So in 2008, Facebook offered them $500 million in preferred stock, but Twitter rejected the offer. They said they have, and even now they say they have no interest. The founding members say they have no interest in selling Twitter, which I think is a big mistake. So in September 2009, venture capitalists valued the company at $1 billion. February 2011, venture capitalists value it at $3.7 billion. And now it's valued anywhere up to $10 billion on rumors that the company could potentially be bought by Facebook or Google. The problem with this is that it's probably not going to be purchased by Facebook or Google. After Facebook's $500 million offer was declined, Facebook incorporated Twitter-like features, including their timeline and instant updates, into the Facebook experience. Google, likewise, has Google Buzz, where it's a similar messaging service, and they're both trying to work around Twitter. Twitter might have the user count right now, but Facebook and Google offer a much more expansive, in-depth experience than Twitter can offer. And $10 billion for what would essentially be an add-on to Facebook's existing offer, or Google's existing offer, just doesn't seem accurate. I mean, I don't think that there's the value that people suspect it is, because I think Google and Facebook are no longer potential buyers. If they're no longer potential buyers, that dramatically downshifts the value of the company. What they need to do is they need to start lowering expectations of their investors. They basically missed the boat. They haven't missed it. They've missed the boat with Facebook and Google at this point. So they need to start looking for a potential buyer, or at least partner, someone who's making money, who has capital. If they want Twitter to continue to grow, they need to find other sources of funding, because venture capitalists are going to be a lot less patient when they start to see that Google and Facebook are creating similar capabilities without the need for Twitter. Twitter also needs to start lowering the expectations, like I said, just because if they come out one day and their valuation takes a hit by 2/3, that could potentially sink the company. Twitter needs to start creating their out now, so that as other people realize Facebook and Google probably aren't going to buy them, Twitter can say, but we are going to do X, Y, and Z. I think that a potential for Twitter is to focus on going further abroad. A lot of tech companies have this mindset of US first, based in Silicon Valley, dramatic focus in the US. Facebook was US focused for a very long time. It's still predominantly US focused. What I think they need to do is they need to look outside of the US. They already have close to half of their users outside the US. The fact that the Arab Spring utilized Twitter instead of a competing platform to kind of organize this suggests that they already had Twitter on their phones, and also that Twitter has an established reputation, established foothold within these developing countries. And within the case itself, they compare Twitter to Skype, which started out not making any money, and Skype ended up being very profitable by the end of the kind of vignette about them, when they were eventually sold by eBay. I think a better comparison would be AOL. AOL made its bread and butter connecting people via dial-up, but as the US became more wired for high-speed internet, AOL decreased its presence within the US marketplace. At the same time, they realized that there was a growing population in the developing world that still had to rely on dial-up internet, and AOL became a major player outside of the US. I think that that's what Twitter needs to do, is they need to change their mentality from a US-centric to a global-centric, developing world-centric perspective, because that's where they're going to get 1 billion users. Simply put, there are not 1 billion Americans, but there are 6 billion people in the world. They have to look abroad, and I think that they're going to have a much easier time abroad than they would in the US to get to where they want to go. They also need to work towards making their source coding right now is open source. So it means anyone can go in and incorporate Twitter features, or modify Twitter, build on top of Twitter basically. They provide the foundation, and so I can create an app to go on top of Twitter, however you like it. But what they need to do is they need to start working and partnering with companies that have closed source coding. So, say Google or Facebook or any of them, Twitter needs to start actively seeking out opportunities to integrate itself into other programs. It needs to start to create that biosphere, if you will, of interconnectedness. And to do that, they need to find other sites, other services that people really value. And that will most likely be closed source. So they need to start working on that. They need to start trying to incorporate themselves into other services. And it also needs to work to mesh their offerings with other companies' offerings. When you go into Google, it's not just Google Plus or Google search engine. It's an entire interconnected web of offerings. In order to compete, Twitter needs to work more towards integrating itself with other offerings, both open and closed source code, so that they can better compete with the overall experience of, say, a Google or a Facebook. So, for a wrap up, I think what Twitter really needs to do is it needs to take an unbiased look at itself and say, are we really worth $10 billion if Google and Facebook said tomorrow they wouldn't buy us? If they do that, I believe the honest answer would be no. I believe that it would shift the way that they interact with other companies and their mentality in a positive direction. I think Twitter can be a powerhouse company, but I also believe that Twitter still has a long way to go, and that they're going through a growth spurt right now that will not last till their 2013 goals. But the sooner that they start becoming more realistic about their hopes and their expectations, the sooner they'll be able to mature into a responsible, valuable member of the web community and be able to nurture others that are starting to grow and go through a similar phase as Twitter is now. One last thing, this was the Bloomberg Businessweek cover, and I just liked it because it had some comical pictures, and the title is Twitter, the company that couldn't kill itself, has finally turned a quarter. And this was 2 years, I apologize, it was a year after the case ends. So I thought that was funny.